At that time, I was 28 years old, married to Morgan, but we didn't have children. 2 years into our marriage, Morgan's business trips and drinking parties increased, making me suspicious. I finally gathered the courage to confront him about it. I asked if his business trips had increased, but he snapped back, accusing me of interfering with his work. Morgan's behavior became strange, and he started ignoring my opinions, even when it came to buying a new car. He insisted on choosing the car he liked, and I had to share the expenses, despite my objections. He never helped with household chores, and I ended up bearing most of the living expenses. Morgan's mobile phone revealed suspicious messages, mostly from his subordinates at work. When I questioned him about infidelity, he dismissed it as normal boss-subordinate interactions. Things took a darker turn when he hit me. I realized I had married someone proud and full of himself, and our incompatibility became painfully evident. My mental health suffered, and I lost weight. I finally confided in my family, fearing their response, but my dad and brother supported me. Dad advised me to get rid of Morgan and come back home. Realizing I no longer loved Morgan and that my fear of divorce was holding me back, I decided to end the marriage. I took matters into my own hands, gathering evidence of Morgan's affair. I hired a detective and a lawyer, deciding to handle the divorce negotiations myself. My family offered help, but I only asked for their support from behind. Jacob, my brother, encouraged me to do it thoroughly. I secretly forwarded suspicious texts from Morgan's phone, saved messages on his computer, and even installed a GPS in his car. Despite the challenges of finding a detective agency and a lawyer, I pressed on with determination. I contacted an agency advertising in the paper and met with their investigator at a cafe. As he became pushy, insisting on unnecessary details and trying to add extra options to increase the investigation fee, I found myself in a challenging situation. He even suggested taking a loan for the investigation, but I politely refused. I searched for another agency and found one with reasonable fees. With a GPS in the car, I already knew Morgan's and his affair partner's movements. I had her address and name, making the investigation minimal. The detective I hired efficiently captured her dates and hotel entries. The head of the detective agency praised me for making their investigation easy by gathering evidence. With a good amount of evidence, I started looking for a law firm. I faced rejections initially but persisted in my search. Eventually, I found a lawyer who understood my situation at a firm offering paid consultations. At this point, I was so resolved that I didn't care about Morgan's texts or dates with his affair partner. I began to eat again, and my will to leave returned. Living normally, Morgan started to grumble, perhaps feeling guilty, but it was too late for that. I preferred him to continue carefree, as it worked in my favor for the divorce. I was determined to fight thoroughly. Morgan seemed concerned, but he couldn't resist his instincts, continuing his outings under the guise of meetings. Finally, preparations were almost complete. As Morgan left for his usual rendezvous, I packed my bags and left for my parents' house. Driving there, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I remembered an important detail. I had forgotten to retrieve the GPS I planted in Morgan's car, which I had partially paid for. Checking the location, I found the car parked at their favorite hotel, so I decided to retrieve it with the help of my brother, Jacob. He was excited, as if preparing for battle, and accompanied me, concerned that I couldn't handle it alone. However, he was the one who needed to calm down. Jacob successfully retrieved the GPS from Morgan's car in the hotel parking lot. Despite having paid half for the car, I hardly drove it. His affair partner was always in the passenger seat. I lamented this, but Jacob reacted strongly, suggesting I drive it. Despite my hesitation, I decided to drive a bit mischievously. When I parked again, I chose a different spot and parked the car awkwardly at an angle. Jacob exclaimed that diagonal parking was perfect. We locked the car and left with the GPS. Jacob joked that this would give the couple something to talk about when they saw the car parked like that. He seemed amused, and I think I enjoyed it too. It was the first time I felt like this since discovering the affair. I was grateful for Jacob's presence that night. We shared a hotel story with my family, laughing and having a great time. I might have been overly excited, trying to reclaim the time of loss and misery. My family created a bright atmosphere, caring for me. I wondered if I would have faced Morgan's infidelity this way if I were alone. No, definitely not. I was thankful for my family's presence and support. Late at night, Morgan repeatedly called my phone, but I ignored him. He must have panicked, finding the car moved and me gone. After leaving the hotel, I had left a letter at home saying, "I'll be staying at my parents' for a while." He knew where I was. He kept calling my phone, but didn't dare to call my parents' house, letting his pride prevent him from facing reality. His texts were self-centered as usual, complaining about work and questioning my whereabouts. Deciding to give him a taste of his own medicine, I ignored his calls and messages. Realizing that his hotel stay was exposed, the next day I had my lawyer contact Morgan. From then on, all communication was through the lawyer. Morgan became apologetic, flooding my voicemail with excuses and pleas. To maintain a serious approach, I had the lawyer give Morgan some educational guidance, which thankfully quieted things down. Following the plan with my lawyer, I sent a certified letter to the affair partner, claiming compensation in a divorce case. For Morgan, it was a triple treat: divorce compensation, divorce case compensation, and property division. The affair partner, who lived with her parents, panicked upon receiving the letter from my lawyer and turned to Morgan after days of silence. Morgan texted her, claiming she's innocent, but it was obvious they were still connected. My lawyer promptly warned him not to contact her, stating that non-compliance would be reported to the authorities. It went quiet again, and later, the affair partner expressed her willingness to pay compensation. She claimed Morgan, her superior, had forced her into the relationship despite it lasting for years. I felt disgusted, but instead of protesting, I decided to respond calmly, suggesting she file a police report for herself, as her lie was transparent and wouldn't work. I refrained from getting involved in her attempts to shift blame and responsibility. I suggested that she should take responsibility not just for herself, but for other women as well. She turned pale and started shaking in response to my direct challenge. If she was going to clam up when confronted, she shouldn't have lied in the first place. She seemed more pathetic than I expected, claiming to be forced into a relationship yet willing to pay for divorce case compensation. I pointed out the contradiction in her actions, reminding her that she's 30 and should feel ashamed for not taking responsibility for her actions. When I mentioned having a report from the detective agency, she stiffened. Despite her claims of harassment being absurd after trips to spa resorts and Guam, she seemed eager to settle without her parents finding out. She agreed to pay $15,000 of the $30,000 I demanded, settling immediately. Luckily, her parents didn't see the certified letter. While I wanted to expose her to her parents for bad-mouthing me and taking money from Morgan, I prioritized a quick resolution to avoid prolonging negotiations with him. With the affair partner settled, it was now Morgan's turn. I asserted that I wanted a divorce and to recover what I spent. Morgan, however, was adamant, stating he didn't want a divorce or to pay compensation. We were at an impasse. Morgan insisted on talking, so I agreed to meet him accompanied by my lawyer. The meeting was calmer than expected. Morgan started by criticizing me for snooping through texts and hiring a detective. He persistently attacked me as usual, but being blamed by someone who was cheating didn't affect me. I reminded him that if he wasn't cheating, being followed by a detective wouldn't have been a problem. It was all his own doing. Morgan apologized over the phone, but didn't offer a single story or explanation for his actions. When we met face to face, if Morgan had sincerely apologized, I might have been softer on him, but that wasn't the case. I decided to initiate divorce mediation, and if that didn't work, I was ready to go to court. The evidence I had collected, including verbal abuse and infidelity, was as thick as a phone book. The detective's reports and the lawyer had validated them, providing ample evidence. I couldn't lose. I remembered the old me, terrified of Morgan's tyranny. It was because I had resolved to be strong and leave my weaker self behind that I was here now. My past self wouldn't have believed my current situation. In the end, no agreement was reached at the meeting. Just before it ended, I said to Morgan, "You always boasted about yourself, but you're far from it. Your mistress is a bigger person." She cried, saying you forced her into the relationship. Despite being a victim, she not only apologized but also paid full compensation for the divorce case. She was so honorable that I even reduced her compensation by half. Morgan, who had been ranting, was left speechless, his face turning red. I continued, "She may have been foolish, but how does it feel to be dumped by such a woman after you lavished her with gifts? In the end, she was just after your money and had little love for you. You always wanted to be surrounded by luxury cars and clothes, a shallow man who's easy to spot. You're like a man covered in gold plating. Nothing of value remains once it peels off. Abandoned by both wife and mistress, you're pathetic. You left so much evidence of your infidelity, you have no chance of winning in court. It will become known at your workplace too. I wonder how a man involved in workplace affairs and facing legal trouble will be treated. You keep dragging things out." As I confronted Morgan, I asserted that if I set my mind to it, I could easily ruin him. I questioned whether he understood the consequences, emphasizing that, as an adult, he should learn to apologize. People with no substance, I remarked, are often full of pride, mistakenly viewing an apology as a defeat. I noted that if he thought preserving his dignity meant avoiding an apology, he was beyond saving. To others, he was just a pathetic man who couldn't accept defeat, and I'd urged him to keep that in mind. It was my final advice to him. Morgan couldn't respond and was left dumbfounded. It was truly satisfying to watch. Eventually, he left hastily, barely saying goodbye to the lawyer. I anticipated that this might take longer than expected and thought I might have to settle the matter in family court. My lawyer agreed, stating that given Morgan's behavior, my ex-husband was definitely going to clash with the mistress. True to his nature, he might give her a piece of his mind. While my remarks were initially meant to be spiteful, they seemed to have an unexpected effect. However, before it even reached mediation, Morgan waved the white flag. He feared the information getting out at work. While he didn't pay the full demanded amount, he agreed to pay $30,000 immediately and $20,000 in installments, totaling $50,000. We also agreed to cut off all ties completely. This resolution might have seemed unimaginable before, but this experience showed Morgan that I was someone who followed through when I decided to do something. Surprisingly, he never defaulted on his payments, perhaps realizing the consequences of doing so. The ordeal ended with a sense of closure, and I could finally move forward from the painful chapter in my life. Later, as expected, the mistress contacted my lawyer, revealing that she had been on the receiving end of a relentless attack from my ex-husband. Given that they worked at the same place, he didn't act openly but persistently attacked her behind the scenes. What a petty man. Unable to consult her family as she was hiding the affair, she sought advice from my lawyer on what to do and where to go. I was almost impressed by her audacity to consult us, though she might just be foolish. To the mistress, my lawyer advised that there were many ways to avoid him, such as resigning or talking to her family for protection. He emphasized that this was an issue between her and him. As a representative, she came to my office on her own to seek help, and maybe she should find another lawyer for consultation. He seemed to have replied with a firm stance. Eventually, unable to bear it anymore, she confided in her parents and resigned. Her parents, feeling the need to apologize on her behalf, contacted my lawyer. Since everything was already settled, I declined their apology, understanding that dealing with a 30-year-old daughter's mess might not be something they would want to handle. I sympathized with the mistress's parents, understanding the complexity of the situation. Later, my ex-husband also contacted my lawyer after the mistress resigned and involved her parents. He became subdued, or perhaps he started to reflect on himself. On the phone, he said, I feel a terror of the consequences my infidelity has caused. I wish I could start over. It seemed like a moment of realization for him, acknowledging the gravity of his actions and the impact they had on those around him. But it's too late, and it hurts. He seemed to be hoping my lawyer would mediate between us. My lawyer told him that I've handled many divorces, but ours was the most decisive about it. Reconciliation was out of the question. He silently hung up. Now single, he can date whoever he wants. Has his passion for the mistress cooled off? That's not my concern anymore. I am truly grateful for my parents, Jacob, and my brother's wife. When things calmed down a bit, I asked Jacob, "Have I become stronger?" He replied, "You're stronger than before. Bro's wife is the strongest." My brother's wife kicked him immediately, and Jacob groaned. They're still a lovely couple. Now I am leaving freely. I can work hard at my job, and food tastes good again. I regained my lost weight quickly. Though I was once devastated, those who have been through hell are strong. I think so of myself. I heard my ex-husband struggles to pay the compensation from the divorce case, working overtime to earn enough. The relationship between my ex and his mistress became gossip at their workplace, and he is working hard to avoid being fired. I didn't report him to his workplace. I could have pushed him to layoffs, but my lawyer said it's good to live a little escape route. That's the art of dealing with such people, he says. It's the ultimate trick when dealing with that kind of people. It's been 30 years since then. I remarried my current husband and had 2 children. They are independent now, each building their own family. I hope their spouses are wonderful people, but if they ever suffer like I did, I want to be their savior, just like my family was for me. The old me might not have been able to do it, but I who had overcome hell surely can. I hope you guys enjoy our video. To watch more interesting stories, hit that subscribe button. Thank you.